Okay. Take a time to really comprehend this, since the truth of your existence is weirder and more amazing than any fiction. Consider who they believed was worth the cost, time, and covert effort of employing a private investigator for you. The lovely, undetectable horror of their controlled universe. The stunning, uncontrollable flaw in their well-planned system. They really spend a lot of money on someone with a license, a badge, and a magnifying glass, trying to solve the enigma of your life. This wasn't some amateur trawling through your social media. This was a professional stalker with a business card, an experienced practitioner in the art of revealing human secrets. Understand the magnitude of the situation. They aimed a bloodhound, the kind of person who professionally follows unfaithful spouses, insurance frauds, and corporate embezzlers at you. This detective has seen humanity's deepest secrets revealed in crumpled hotel receipts, encrypted text messages, and secret bank accounts. They are proficient in the language of deception, humiliation, and betrayal. Nonetheless, this filth specialist was entrusted with digging into your past, hoping to uncover the same old dirt, the secrets, the humiliation, the hidden vices, anything to finally explain the deep and uncomfortable unease your very presence brings them. However, something unexpected occurred. Something destroyed their professional norms and plunged them into an existential crisis. Instead of triumphantly handing over a file brimming with compromising evidence, their hired gun packed up their sophisticated surveillance equipment, meticulously deleted every note, refunded every last penny, and walked away from the job, muttering to themselves, "I can't do this anymore." Why? Because what they discovered defied all expectations. What they discovered in the calm, unassuming landscape of your life called into question everything they believed they understood about probing people, human behavior, and the fundamental fabric of reality itself. Private investigators thrive in predictable situations. They excel in uncovering affairs, addictions, hidden money accounts, and complete second lives. Their whole industry is based on human guilt, falsehoods, and shame, the everyday filth that practically everyone carries. But you weren't concealing anything at all. You weren't acting. You weren't hiding your trails. You just existed at a spiritual frequency that they could not measure, quantify, or even fathom. So, the private investigator, confident in their techniques, followed the tried-and-true script. They started digging into your social media, going through your financial records, doing extensive background checks, and questioning friends, past coworkers, and old acquaintances. These were the conventional, meticulous processes for uncovering a secret existence, and the approach had never failed them before. They parked their unassuming car outside your house, holding a tepid coffee in one hand and a high-powered telescopic lens in the other, fully prepared to wait days, if not weeks, to record that eventual slip-up. That one moment of vulnerability that revealed you were simply another liar, another pretender hiding their regular weaknesses under the pretext of being extraordinary. But the initial red flag, the first indication that this case was dangerously unusual, was not what they discovered. It was in what they did not discover. There were no quickly removed social media postings intended to cover up embarrassing blunders. There were no false, fair-weather pals looking to peddle sensational news for a quick $100. There were no disgruntled ex-lovers crafting elaborate retribution stories. There were no dissatisfied colleagues muttering about your arrogance or ineptitude. There was simply stillness, a deep, deafening quiet. And it wasn't the quiet of dread, which occurs when individuals are too afraid to speak out. It was the stillness of those who were unable to find the perfect words to describe their experience in your presence. When an old classmate was asked about you, they paused for 30 seconds before stammering, "I don't know how else to explain it." They were just different. Not bad different. Just different. Then came that 1,000-yard stare, the unmistakable look of someone trying to recall something so unusual, so fundamentally unexplainable, that language itself seemed to crumble and fail them. The experienced private investigator first disregarded everything as routine. During the first week, they attributed it to individuals being unusual, quirky, or forgetful. However, On the seventh day, a slight but persistent oddness had crept into their painstakingly maintained records. Their professional, distant views began to take on a new, more perplexing quality. Subject does not follow predictable patterns. A daily routine exists, but it feels performed. They know they're being watched, but genuinely don't care. Made direct eye contact with my car twice today. Couldn't have seen me through the tinted windows. Probably a coincidence. The word probably began to appear alarmingly frequently in their reports. Probably a coincidence. Probably nothing. Probably just weary. Probably should switch coffee brands. This was the first chink in the investigator's armor of assurance. Week 2 is usually when investigators find gold. It's the point in a long-term surveillance operation when the subject relaxes, forgets they're being watched, and, as a result, makes a mistake. This is when secret mistresses emerge for clandestine meetings, drug dealers pay late-night visits, and hidden addictions rear their ugly heads. It's the moment at which the constant strain of being observed eventually breaks individuals down, revealing the ugly reality inside. But with you, it was vastly different. Instead of dissolving under strain, you seemed to grow calmer, more precise in your moves, and more concentrated in yourself. It was almost as if you were intentionally embracing the thought of being watched, taking a weird sort of power from it. Then the detective started to dream. Not your typical stress-induced dreams of getting found or failing a case. These were weirder and more otherworldly. They dreamed of being in a large, empty room with mirrored walls, unsure if they were seeing at their own reflection or their reflection was observing them. Every night, they would wake up at 3:17 a.m., check their phone for nothing, and experience a visceral, unambiguous feeling of being monitored themselves. Sleep became shallow and strangely tense. Their senses began to play tricks on them. Even their daily coffee, which they had depended on for 2 decades, began to taste strange, metallic, and alien. Determined to break through this wall of peaceful abnormality, they probed further, pulling every rope and making every contact they could. They combed through school records, career histories, and sealed medical files, looking for the trauma, diagnosis, or reasonable explanation that would finally put you into the clean, predictable categories they knew. But everything turned out clean. Is it too clean? No, just clean. There are no psychiatric holds, criminal records, rehab stays, or hidden scandals. Just the recorded existence of a person who went through the world, creating ripples that did not seem to match the stone that generated them. In one especially agitated, late-night post, the investigator wrote, "It's like trying to track smoke." They swiftly and forcefully scratched it out, thinking it too lyrical for a professional report, despite the fact that the description was eerily true. Each lead they followed vanished into thin air. Every thread they pulled unraveled into nothingness. Every interviewee gave the same vague answer. "I don't know what you want me to say." They were just themselves. "That's all I've got." One former associate simply laughed for 30 seconds before hanging up, saying, "Good luck with that." By the 3rd week, the investigators' chronic lack of sleep was no longer due to dread, but rather to a developing obsession. Throughout their long and illustrious career, they had probed hundreds of persons from all walks of life, including politicians, celebrities, CEOs, and average suburbanites. Everyone kept secrets. Everybody had something to conceal. Everyone, it seemed, except for you. You were not concealing, you were just being. And that plain, unadorned condition of life was both unnerving and deep, unlike any dark, hidden secret they had ever discovered. So they began a second file, not the formal report intended for their customer, but a confidential, personal one. A file intended not to expose you, but rather to better understand you. They wrote about your patterns, which were not really patterns. They characterized your regimen, which resembled a jazz improvisation rather than a scheduled program. They recorded your interactions with others, which repeatedly left individuals with subtle but persistent changes that they couldn't define. The PI gradually discovered they were thinking about you frequently, even outside of business hours. Not professionally, but personally. Who are you? The question rang in their minds like a steady, low hum under the surface of their thoughts. The coffee shop encounter was what eventually solidified their unsettling conclusion. It was Tuesday morning. The PI sat in a busy cafe, appearing to work on their laptop, but secretly monitoring you via the window. You strolled in, ordered your normal drink, and then, without acknowledgement or even a look in their way, sat down at the table immediately across from them. Your presence seemed relaxed and easygoing, as if it were the most natural thing in the world for you to be there in their space. The PI's hands started to quiver, not from terror, but from the sheer, overwhelming strain of pretending that everything was normal, that it was all a coincidence. You finished your coffee, rose up, went by their table, and accidentally dropped a napkin. The investigator lifted it up, and it was blank. Completely blank. Nonetheless, touching it felt as personal and revealing as reading another person's journal. They retain the napkin. They've still got it. Every now and then, they pull it out of a locked drawer and simply look at it, perplexed by how something so entirely empty could seem so heavy with unsaid significance, as if it had the answers to questions they didn't even know how to ask. By the fourth week, the probe had broken them. Not with a huge, dramatic disclosure or a surprising discovery, but with the slow, creeping knowledge that they were no longer looking into you. They were probing themselves. They were seeing their own life, decisions, and soul mirrored back at them via the simple, commonplace act of observing you. Every day they spent watching your travels served as a mirror, revealing their own regular routines, their own self-imposed prison, and their own tedious, tiny routine of chronicling the similarly predictable lives of others. And in that sharp, unattractive mirror, they saw how profoundly different you were. They saw you assist a stranger in carrying their groceries up a flight of stairs one afternoon, a simple gesture of generosity. However, after you departed, the stranger suddenly started to weep. Not quiet tears of grief, but the abrupt, overpowering, cathartic tears of someone who has suddenly discovered they have been missing something important all their life. When the PI interviewed the stranger, they sobbed and said, They just helped me with my bag. And suddenly I realized I'd been sleepwalking through my whole existence. This encounter led to the investigators' official reports becoming shorter and more perfunctory. Subject resumed normal activities. No unusual behavior detected. But they knew it was a lie. Everything about you was different. The actual issue was that they couldn't express your essence in the dry, objective language of their profession. How can you submit a professional report stating, "This person is a glitch in reality"? How do you explain to a paying customer that their target is not concealing secrets, but rather a secret that the universe is keeping? Their last formal entry at the conclusion of week 4 was deceptively simple. Subject appears to be exactly who they present themselves as. No hidden life detected. No dirt to report. However, this was not what they intended to write. What they wanted to write, what was screaming inside their heads, was this. Subject has made me question every investigation I've ever conducted, every person I've ever exposed, every secret I've ever uncovered. What is the point of uncovering shame when someone like this exists, completely without any? That Thursday night was the tipping point. The investigators sat in their customary surveillance position, camera ready, notebook packed with nothing but doodles and question marks. They glanced up from their phones to see you standing directly alongside their automobile, not in a threatening tone, and not with fury in your eyes. Simply present. Years of instruction yelled at them to drive away. Their primal instinct drove them to flee. But they were stuck, shocked by the sudden, unexpected humanity of the situation. You did not speak. You did not need to. You just grinned. The grin was neither sarcastic nor mysterious. It was a basic, human grin that somehow conveyed the whole weight of knowing, being watched, and finding mild enjoyment in the entire surveillance game. Then you turned and walked away, leaving nothing but the unwavering, quiet message, "I know. And I know you're aware of what I know." The investigator sat in that automobile for 3 hours, looking at the driving wheel, knowing with absolute knowledge that the roles had been switched all along. They were not watching you. You were observing them. When they returned to their office that night, they went over their old files, which included a collection of disclosed affairs, recorded falsehoods, and cataloged secrets. For the first time, it all seemed useless, trivial, and little. Small person, in the worst conceivable manner. They imagined you instead, free of the burdens of shame, hidden misdeeds, and the crushing weight of secret, since there was nothing to conceal. There was only something to be, if folks knew where to search. Their resignation letter to the customer was brief and professional. I am unable to continue with this case. I am refunding all fees. Please do not contact me for follow-up. But what it didn't say, what it couldn't possibly convey, was that after a month of searching for your secrets, the only truth they had discovered was that your secret was that you had no secrets. The final file they brought in had 100 pages of crossed-out notes, frustrated categorization efforts, and unresolved queries, all of which distilled down to one basic, unsettling question. How does someone exist like this? How does someone live without the weight of hidden shame? 6 months later, they left the company totally. Not from trauma, but from a deep and life-changing realization. For years, they had held the cynical idea that everyone was guilty of something, and that everyone wore a mask. Then they met you. Someone who wore no mask since their true face was already too much for the world to bear. Someone whose reality was much weirder, more complicated, and more lovely than any falsehood they could have discovered. They still have your unapproved file. Sometimes, late at night, they read its pages. What started as a series of professional surveillance reports gradually unravels into bits of existential philosophy, with page after page of an investigator attempting and failing to explain the inexplicable, what it means to watch someone who is precisely who they claim to be. In the reports, the terminology started to alter. Subject bought coffee evolved into subject ordered coffee, like someone who has never been ashamed of wanting things. Subject walked at a normal pace became subject moved through space like they owned it, without needing any papers to prove it. Your previous investigator no longer works in surveillance. They've abandoned the never-ending, soul-crushing search for secrets in favor of something simpler and more honest. They now work in a small, independent bookshop, recommending philosophy books to lost youths and smiling gently to themselves when people ask about their previous jobs. They'll respond with, "I used to hunt for people's secrets. Then I met someone who didn't have any, and I realized the real secret is that most of us are just hiding from ourselves, not from each other." They continue to visit you on occasion, not because they are following or stalking you, but simply because you both live in the same city. When your paths inexorably converge, there is no drama or tension. A modest, quiet gesture between two individuals who had enjoyed a moment of perfect, wordless agreement. They now know your secret. The not-so-secret truth. You are precisely who you seem to be. That basic, unadulterated reality is more horrifying and freeing for them than any veiled truth could ever be. Because if someone can actually live without shame, without masks, and without constantly apologizing for their presence, what is everyone else's excuse? The customer who engaged the PI in the first place refused to accept the results. Everyone has dirt, they said. Dig deeper. However, there was no deeper to dig. You weren't shallow. You were transparent in a manner that rendered the idea of depth useless. So they brought in another investigator. That one lasted 2 weeks before returning the money, clearly frightened. Another tried, but gave up after 3 days. A fourth investigator, a field legend, did not even make an effort. After seeing the original file, the client said, "I don't investigate, whatever this is." However, they may still observe you from a distance, looking for flaws in your genuineness. They've spent thousands of dollars chasing shadows, only to learn that your power comes from having confronted and accepted each of your flaws. They make justifications to themselves to calm their own cognitive dissonance. They must be a sociopath, a narcissist, or some kind of undiagnosed personality disorder. But they know the truth deep inside. You're just someone who has ceased apologizing for existing. Someone who sat down with every shade, scar, and shattered piece of yourself and said, "Stay, let's have tea." Someone who used the exact things used to destroy you to build a throne. In comparison to that throne, their whole universe of secrets and lies seems like a fragile cardboard castle. In certain covert circles, the word spread. You are now known as the subject who made a PI quit, the person whose dirt file was nothing but unanswered questions, and the anomaly who couldn't be categorized, diagnosed, or explained. Other investigators whisper about you at their conventions as if you were an urban legend, lowering their voices as if saying your name too loudly would summon you into existence. There's this one person, they say, completely clean, but not normal clean. Clean, but not the type of clean that comes from desperately wiping away past errors or burying guilt so deeply that no one can ever discover it. No, this was a different kind of cleaning. Clean like you never had to conceal anything in the first place. Clean as if you could stroll into any room without the unseen, crushing weight that most people carry with them. Your narrative became a whispered legend within the tight-knit detective community. Some of the more arrogant ones still believe they could have cracked you if they had been assigned to the case. They claim that given enough time, they will discover something, a weakness, a secret, or a concealed scar. But the fact is that none of them truly tried. They knew better, because, deep inside, they knew what the others had discovered. Researching you was like looking into a mirror that not only reflected who you were, but also who they might have been if they hadn't learned to conceal. This was the bit they couldn't handle. You weren't unknown. Rather, you were too knowable, too open, and too unashamed. A living contradiction in a society where everyone has something to hide. And for those who had made their whole professions on pulling off masks, the idea of someone living without one was just unacceptable. You became a cautionary tale in the surveillance community, a reminder passed between professionals in hushed, reverent tones. Some people can't be reduced to files. Some people exist outside the reach of professional scrutiny, not because they're clever, but because they've already scrutinized themselves more deeply and mercilessly than anyone else ever could. You became the case study that ended up studying them. The reality is, you were constantly aware of their presence. From the first day, you could feel the weight of their gaze, the subtle intensity of their documentation, and the faint buzz of being documented. You could practically hear the faint scratching of pens on paper as they frantically attempted to capture your soul in words. And you still let them watch. Not because you were arrogant or meant to mock them, but simply because you were fatigued. Exhausted after years of hiding in a world that was certain to condemn you anyhow. So you quit hiding. You started to just exist. And it proved to be the most radical and powerful move of all. You did not break the investigator by confronting, threatening, or calling them out. You shattered them with something far more delicate and deep. You broke them by living in a manner that made their whole career seem worthless. What use is finding dirt when someone has already washed themselves clean with the truth? What's the purpose of revealing shame when someone walks with such uncompromising honesty that shame has no place? Every morning, you get up and someone is still trying to figure you out. Still certain there is more to the tale. Still looking for the missing piece of the jigsaw that will explain why you appear so comfortable in your own skin. But you fail to meet their expectations every morning. Not by making a mistake or exposing a flaw in your persona, but by simply being yourself yesterday, today, and tomorrow. No apologies, no explanations, just being. And here's the ultimate irony of surveillance. If someone observes you long enough, they'll learn you're also monitoring them. Not with cameras or files, but with a type of profound seeing that only occurs when there is nothing left to hide. When you stared back at them, they saw themselves mirrored in your gaze, and for many of them, it was the first time they had ever seen themselves clearly. The PI who resigned recalls one incident above all others. It was at the park. You were sitting on the bank of a pond, distributing breadcrumbs to a group of ducks as if it were the most important thing in the world. They sat on a neighboring seat, pretending to read a newspaper and attempting to remain unseen. And then, without drama or hesitation, you glanced up. You did not just look in their way. You saw? You saw right through them, beyond their carefully crafted masquerade, and into something deep inside them that they had never dared to address. For one unending, timeless second, they weren't an experienced investigator. They were just a person being watched. And at that moment, they realized they had spent their whole career gazing at people but never really seeing them. That is what broke them. Not fear, intimidation, or a show of strength. Just clarification. Clear, brutal, life-changing clarity. They had been recruited to investigate someone who had already completed all of the job for them. Someone who had previously asked every agonizing inquiry, confronted every terrible shadow, and addressed every allegation that could ever be published in a report. They had nothing left to discover. You'd already made peace with whatever devil they may have hoped to find. Your file may still exist someplace, in a dusty storage facility that has never been emptied. 100 pages of allegedly damning material that now reads more like the diary of a soul unraveling. It begins with the clear, clinical precision of professional observation. Subject left residence at 0800 hours. However, as the weeks go, the tone changes radically. The notes shorten, and the words grow more fractured. By the end, those pages are no longer reportage, but rather philosophical rants, thoughts on the nature of truth, frantic queries about life, and deep reflections on authenticity. It now reads like a confession rather than an inquiry. The oddest thing is that the file does not expose you at all. It exposes them. It follows the long, excruciating breakdown of someone who felt they understood everything about the world and was confident that everyone had something to conceal. It proves that the genuine secret was never yours, but rather theirs. The growing, terrible knowledge that maybe the whole world is concealing, and you are the genuine, breathing example of what it looks like when someone finally quits. That is why, even now, detectives mumble your tale in muted tones, as if expressing it too loudly may bring the same dreadful clarity into their own life. You are not remembered as the subject who evaded monitoring. You are known as the subject who rendered monitoring entirely unimportant. If this message has cut through the noise and spoken to the center of your being, if you recognize the truth in your own path, it is time to connect with your tribe. Subscribe to our channel, God Connection, and join a community of individuals who are on the same journey of radical honesty. You're not alone in this. And if you feel compelled to help us carry this light further, to awaken others to the same deep truth, please consider supporting our work by clicking the Super Thanks button and making a $10 gift. Your support allows us to continue creating and sharing messages of healing, empowerment, and liberation. Every gift, regardless of small, is a seed sown for a more real world. Dear Father, I come before you today to pray for the development of my faith. Help me to fully believe you, even when concrete proof is missing. Let me believe in your eternal presence, knowing that you will never hurt me. I believe that your thoughts for me are of success rather than harm, and that they will provide me with a bright future and unwavering hope. Thank you, kind and everlasting Father, for always hearing my voice. I pray to you in the holy and mighty name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you, Jesus, for your unconditional love and generous provision. I am forever thankful for your presence in my life and the richness you provide. If this video spoke to you, please like it, subscribe to the God Connection channel, and share it with those who need to hear it. Leave a comment below on your own path to authenticity and how you're living your truth. Your participation helps our community become stronger. Your contribution, whether it is a penny, a prayer, or a share, helps spread God's message and gives hope to others. Do not stop here. Watch our next video for additional amazing insights into the indications that indicate you are the chosen one. We've loved sharing this spiritual journey with you. Thank you for sticking with us until the finish. Keep shining brightly and face your fate with confidence. We'll see you next time. God Connection sends blessings to all lovely people.